Good evening, everyone, and welcome to sunny South Florida. Here we are at Radio Echad, where you could find us on YouTube, Spotify, all the wonderful platforms that you can find us here in sunny South Florida, where Radio Echad gives you not only live entertainment, but also live classes, live shiurim. I'd like to thank my dear friends here at Radio Echad, my dear friend Shachar Nagar, DJ FX Shak, who has been very instrumental in having us come here. He's asked that all the shiurim are dedicated to Ilui Nishmas, Rumia Basada, Yechia ben Rabbi Yehoshua Najar, Miriam Batchana, as well as Ived ben Nisim Ma'olam, and also L'Rfud L'Hatzachad Yitzchak ben Yechia, as well as Yona bat Miriam, Oded ben Yitzchak, all the people who are here. And also, I'd like to personally dedicate today's class, Lili Nishmas, my wife's grandfather is Zayd Mani. His name was Emmanuel ben Yaakov, the patriarch of the family, Dr. Emmanuel Rubin, who actually authored a book called Rubin's Pathology. It is translated, I believe, in 16 or 18 languages throughout the world. Anyone that does any medical field, specifically that of pathology, uses his book. It is the authoritative book of how the body works. He writes concisely, fantastic. You don't need me to laud the praises of such a fantastic book. But Zayn Amani was very proud of it. It took him years to do. And I asked him if I could have a copy, if he could write an inscription. And he was a very sharp, very wise man. And when he wrote on the inscription was, "Dear Yehoshua, you should never need anything in this book. Love, Zayd Emmanuel." And he was an unbelievable person. He was somebody that literally cared for so many different people in his own way. At the Levaya, the people were mentioning how he literally stood up for people who were not able to procure, let's say, arrangements for their home. I could speak about that. He was very instrumental in us getting our home, and he just stepped up and did it. I'm so moved and touched by that this is a man who worked very hard for his family, very hard for other people. I'm told that supposedly the Israeli Mossad, they got in touch with him when he was going to do a number of medical conferences in the Soviet Union, and he was able to give over certain messages over to people who did not have that, and he really didn't care if people threatened him. He was somebody who was very strong about what he believed in. And I remember that towards the end of his life, he actually wore tefillin a number of times. And when I asked him, Zayd Amani, how are you feeling today? His response was, Baruch Adonai Yom Yom, quoting the pasuk in Tehillim. And he was a very wise man, someone who, very sage. His directions were fantastic. And it's somebody that we always look up to as being very precise in whatever it was that he did. And obviously we'd like to dedicate the Shir Lili Nishmasai. His Yartzeit was this past Rosh Chodesh Adar. And we hope that we're keeping up his legacy of excellence in whatever it is that we do. Because that's what he asked of himself. And he learned and he taught us by example. And we obviously hope we can follow in that way. And obviously build upon that wonderful foundation that he laid for every single one of us. So Zayn Amani, this class is dedicated to Lila Nishmasai. I'd like to thank my father-in-law and my mother-in-law for dedicating this class as an Ilu Nishmasai for him as well. This week's Parsha, Parshas Tetzaveh, is a very unique Parsha because it does not mention Moshe Rabbeinu's name at all. It just says, Va'ata Tetzaveh, and you should command all the Bnei Aaron for the following. They should get all the different items, the vestments for the Kohen Gadol, etc. And what's unique about this Parsha is, since Moshe Rabbeinu is not mentioned and Hashem is yet addressing him, we have to understand, why is it, asks Zer Shimshon, that in the previous Parsha we spoke about Nechoshes, we spoke about the copper, the Mizbeach HaNechoshes that was used primarily using the metal of copper. And now when we start this week's Parsha, Parshas Tetzaveh, Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time understanding how the menorah should be constructed. Because the candelabra could be something that could be all around, it could be not even. What exactly is a candelabra? Just walk into a lighting store if you want to really appreciate what that medrash says. And Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time understanding what exactly a menorah should look like. Even to this day, if you walk into a Lubavitcher shul, you'll see that the menorah that they have is that of a very sharp V sign. However, if you to walk into other places, it would be a U, more of an elongated sign. And if you look at the Medinat Yisrael logo, it's sort of a blend of the two, which could be that's maybe the rationale behind the machlokes between the Rambam and other Rishonim as to what the menorah actually looked like. But be that as it may, the menorah was something that Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time understanding how exactly it looked. And not only that, there were two other things they also had a very difficult time. Says Zer Shimshon, you could look in last week's Parsha and it'll actually give you a glimpse to a hint why Moshe Rabbeinu had an obstruction with the copper going into the next part, which is these copper, if you will say, pieces of understanding how he should piece them together. And what was that? Nechayeshes, says the Zer Shimshon, is Rosh Tevis. It's an acronym for Nun stands for Ner, the Ner of Hanukkah. Ches stands for Chodesh. He had a very difficult time understanding what is Rosh Chodesh. How should the moon look like when it comes in its beginning? What does it mean? Its beginning session. What's the end? When is it already teetering towards the other side? Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time. If you want to really appreciate that, look at the Rambam in Echad Kaddish, where the Rambam actually has to have diagrams to explain to you what it had to look like. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah tells us that different Tanoim, they would have in their attic, they would have actual pictures of the moon, and they would ask the Eidim when they saw up in the sky that the moon looked like such and such, they said, please point to a picture of what it looked like, because it was very difficult to say, oh, it was waxing and waning, this is what it looked like. Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time understanding, so he says, the Nun of Nechayeshes, Nun stands for Ner of Hanukkah, Ches stands for Chodesh, for Rosh Chodesh, how it should look like. The Shin stands for the shekel, the Matzah HaShekel coin, and Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time understanding it. And the Taf of Nechayeshes is Tireh, Moshe Rabbeinu, you will see what they will look like. I will show you what they will look like, and therefore you'll get a better understanding. As the Zer Shimshon, why is it these three are hidden to, with Nechayeshes specifically as the prelude to now hinting to these items? And what is it specifically about these that Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time understanding? And remember, everything in Torah is timeless. It's not just for Moshe Rabbeinu. It's for every single one of us to understand this is a lesson for me. I need to somehow inculcate this lesson for myself. Hashem is talking to me. I have a Moshe Rabbeinu inside me as well. What is it teaching me? So perhaps you could say what the Zer Shimshon wants to say is the Nun sounds like this. He says, when it comes to the Ner, you have to know that the Ner of the Chanukiah, of the menorah, this beautiful candelabra that we had 7 branches. The middle, followed by 3 and 3. Each one corresponded to 7 days of the week. And from those 7 days of the week, that gave blessing to the rest of the week. Ner HaEmtzai was the middle Ner that represents Shabbos. He says, this beautiful light would emanate what was inside the chutzner of the Mishkan, of the courtyard of the Mishkan, and then the Beis HaMikdash subsequently after that, would go out and it would bring illumination to the rest of the world. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu had a very hard time understanding how could it be that from a small little candle, from a small area, just over here, you bring great illumination. We have a sun outside, we have lights outside. Why is it that when I'm lighting in this small little place, it's going to give illumination to the rest of the world? Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time understanding. And says Zer Shimshon, I'll double down on that one. Why? Because we know when Shlomo HaMelech, when he constructed the Beis HaMikdash after the Mishkan, not only did he have one menorah, he actually added more menorahs. He had an additional 10. Asks Zer Shimshon, why did he add another 10? He says like this. He says, during the times of Shlomo HaMelech, the reason why he was married to over 1,000 women was because each wife that he was married to represented another element of planet Earth that he wanted to be a part of, that he felt that he could give illumination to the rest of the world. And the best way of doing that is through marriage, by marrying another family. And when he got married to them, he was now part of their system, and he was now going to give illumination to that system as well. So the 70, if you do 10 times 7, because there's 7 branches times 10 is 70. He says those 70 additional branches would correspond to the light that he would illuminate through the menorah here in the Beis HaMikdash. Those 70 lights would correspond to the 70 main nations of the world, and therefore he was lighting specifically with that. However, in the times of the Mishkan, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't need that. All he had was the 7. The 7 is enough for me to do that. The 7 is enough for me to conquer the Shivas Ha'amim, the 7 nations who are residing in Eretz Yisrael, for me to walk in and be able to bring light and illumination and warmth. I don't need more than that. And since he didn't need more than that, all you needed in the Mishkan was just those 7 and Zehu, and that's enough. He did not need all 70 like Shlomo HaMelech did. But Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, from this menorah that we have, you'll be able to say it brings tremendous light and warmth, and it could bring so much to the world and dispel the darkness of a deep, dark world that people won't appreciate. But when you have a Jew acting the way they're supposed to, that brings an unbelievable blessing to the world. And perhaps if we understand this, as Zer Shimshon, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time understanding. I, in my little corner, doing what I'm doing, that really makes a profound difference? The answer is yes, it does. You, Mr. Jew, doing your thing that you're doing makes a profound difference. Just as an example, did you know that quite recently, North Korea, they hire these unbelievable techs. We have Lucas is here, and he's a techie guy, so he understands stuff, and he'll appreciate that. If you have somebody who really knows what he's doing behind a screen, this guy could wreak havoc. Not Lucas, he's a good guy. But there are people who they could really wreak havoc and destroy people's lives. North Korea pays people who are very bright to hack into systems and steal billions. That's what you heard of that right, with a B. Billions of dollars of Bitcoin. I forgot where it was that they went in. They hacked into a certain area a few days ago. Just boom, totally, completely destroyed a certain element and just wiped them out like that. How? In their little corner doing what they're doing. So you see someone doing what they're doing and they know what they're doing in their little corner can have a profound effect on someone else. Think of it as lahavdil, for example. If you have someone of a great politician and what they do or they say, certain acts or statements that they make really can have far-reaching repercussions throughout the rest of the world. And a person has to recognize that. They have to know, as a Jew, you have the world stage. You have the microphone. You have the center stage in the eyes of Hashem. He's looking at you. You're illuminating the world. And Moshe Rabbeinu, in the beginning, he didn't understand that. He said, Hashem, how could that be? Just one little person? Hashem says, yes. And I'll show you through fire, through enthusiasm. You could take a piece of gold, an inglet of gold, and literally Hashem said, I will make it. You'll see it will come forth. It just will happen. A person has to recognize that they want it to happen and everything else will follow. And they have to really work hard and daven to Hashem that they could be zecha, that they can merit to actually see this tremendous bracha. I work with Lubavitch, and I have to tell you, it's an amazing thing. One of the most amazing things to see on a daily basis is, somebody said a great line. He said, Lubavitch has the most asinine, insane business model on planet Earth. It makes no sense how in the world they can open up beautiful Chabad houses in the middle of nowhere and for them to be successful. It just doesn't make any sense. If you'd ask anyone to do the business plan, they would tell you the numbers just don't work out. Don't do it. And people do it. Why? Because they have tremendous love for Lubavitch Rebbe, and they have tremendous adherence to his vision, which was a worldwide vision of how to spread as much Judaism and light to the world. Beautiful idea. That shows you this idea that from one person or one people, you could bring so much good. And Moshe Rabbeinu, in the beginning, initially, didn't understand that. And Hashem had to tell him, no, Ner, from this idea of a Ner, I will let you know you're going to bring great illumination to the world. Next one, Chodesh. What does Rosh Chodesh represent? Says Zera Shimshon. He says, we know that usually every single month is around 15 days for the beginning, when it starts to beginning to go the beginning of the month. And then the next 15 days, from day 15 on to day number 30, is the last part of the month. Says Zera Shimshon, Al Pi Kabbalah, according to Kabbalah, this actually coincides with, from the 15 generations from Avram until Shlomo, was the great glory days of the Jewish people. He said, from the time of Rechavam, Shlomo Melech's son, when unfortunately the kingdom got split between that of Malchus Yehuda and Malchus Yisrael, when that got split in half, unfortunately, that was the beginning of the end. And that led to the ultimate of the next 15 generations until Tzidkiyahu got blinded by Nebuchadnezzar. Why did he get blinded? Because just like the moon now comes in total darkness, Chizkiyahu's eyes were blinded and it was complete darkness for him, symbolizing darkness to the Jewish people when we would go into exile. So the first 15 days symbolizes great strength and mightiness. The next 15 days is beginning the waning period of the Jewish people losing their grip on power. Says the Zohar, from here we see the same thing as well. The Jewish people are compared to that of the Levana, that of the moon, that we are betakva, we are there from literally from the beginning to the culmination of when it's the strongest that it could possibly be. That is when we say ultimately a Jew should strive for as well. So Moshe Rabbeinu had a very hard time understanding that. He said, how could it be that the Jewish people are going up and down and up and down and up and down? It's like a cycle? How could that be? Either we're Hashem's people or not. And says there Shimshon, the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was so perplexed about that was because he said, if I go into Eretz Yisrael and I build the Beis HaMikdash, it will never get destroyed. The Jewish people will live in prosperity, and there's no reason for anyone to get destroyed or hurt. So therefore, it is possible for us to stay in a stagnant, static area where we're not moving and we're sort of locked in. Hashem said, no, that's not the plan. The plan is we have ups and downs. And that way we appreciate what life is all about. Life is ups and downs. If we was all the time buzzing with excitement and happiness, people would just get bored of it and just not appreciate it anymore. And he says, as a result of that, Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time understanding that until Hashem showed him what the Levana should look like. He showed him what the moon should look like. Meaning, this is the idea. It needs to wax and wane. It needs to go up and down. You don't appreciate with the going up if you never had it going down. Or I always tell people, if Chas v'Shalom, someone goes through a tekufa, they go through a period where it's very rough. A, they see who their real friends are. And B is, they will never, ever, ever treat people who are in a similar situation with them with complete not understanding what they're going through, because they went through it. They understand what it is. I think I mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating. I'll never forget when I was working for my alumni, as the alumni coordinator for Telz Yeshiva, they asked me that I should go to various cities and not only meet the very wealthy people, but I should also go door to door collecting as well. It was so demeaning. It was so eye-opening for me to see from the other side what it felt like to get the door slammed in your face, what it felt like people didn't give you the time of the day, what it felt like when people really didn't care about you. Now, chas v'shalom, I'm not saying people are harmful or people are callous. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it was a different perspective that you don't even realize that I probably was doing that myself too, because I never understood it. Until you go through a situation to understand what the other side's going through, you'll never understand. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Then you'll understand what it's like to walk like them. And then you'll appreciate that. So Hashem, sometimes he doesn't want us to go through a situation because he knows we can't handle it. But if we're going through that situation, this should be a very big learning curve for us to understand. Maybe it's for me to help others later on in life who will be going through a similar situation and a circumstance that I can help them with that no one else can help. No one else will understand. When a person recognizes that, it's a lot easier to go through that type of very difficult time. And if a person wants to rectify and reconcile this idea of what it is that they need to do, it becomes much, much lighter on them that they know they can do it, because if Hashem put them through, ultimately they will succeed. So it's the same thing as well. A person has to know, if you have nisyonis, if you have tests, Hashem knows you got this. Hashem knows that you could walk it through. Hashem knows you're going to be able to help other people. And that ultimately is the greatest gift, if you're able to help others. And that's the idea of chodesh, this idea of that we have this his chadshus, that we're able to renew ourselves. And whatever was in the past is the past. There's a new me, a new beginning. I'm a new person. I could start anew, starting right now. And if a person recognizes that they could start new right now, everything's great. Everything's amazing. And Mitzvah Hashem, God willing, a person should be able to do that. And then when it comes to the last one, the matzah shekel, the half shekel coin, which people have a custom that we give this half shekel coin on the day of Tainus Esther, to recognize that during the time, the Mishnah Shkolm tells us, this is when the people will collect the matzah shekel, the half shekel coin, and utilize it for karbonos tzibur, for the different sacrifices that to be brought on behalf of the entire congregation. The matzah shekel, Moshe Rabbeinu had a very difficult time. What does that look like? What does that mean? Half a shekel coin? Hashem had to show him matbeya shalish. He had to show him a literal coin made out of fire. Now, what does that even mean? You show him a coin. Why does it have to be a coin out of fire? The coins are not made out of fire. The coins are made out of metal, and that's what you distribute. Why is he talking about fire? And they say the idea is it has to be done with enthusiasm. Even giving a small little coin. What is it? What's the big deal? A little coin? Even that makes a big deal. What's the big deal if it's a little candle? The answer is it makes a big deal. What's the big deal if it's the moon? Does it really have such a strong gravitational pull and make a king's tide or make some type of ocean, different things in the ocean? The answer is yes. What do you mean? It's the moon all the way up there. What does that have to do with me? The answer is it's got a lot to do with you. It looks like it's small. It's smaller compared to the sun, but it's doing a lot. Don't discount it. It's doing plenty. You have to recognize that too. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I have a hard time. A matzah shekel, half a shekel coin. How is that something that's very good? Hashem said, even the little that you give, the little tidbits that you give here and there, even that is chashuv in my eyes. I was reading somewhere, not that we are advocating on behalf of this, I'm just trying to show you the profound ability that even, quote unquote, a little bit does a great deal. There was somebody recently that somebody told him that there was a certain gambling place that he could go to, and this person walked in, and just as like a joke, totally, absolutely as a joke, he happened to have $50 on him cash. He just walked over to the front and says, do you have a place where I could just place the bet? They said, yeah, sure. What do you want to do? He said, I don't know. He said, this. He said, I have no idea. He said, do you follow sports? He said, well, actually, tell you the truth, yeah, I kind of do, but not really. They said, okay, so who do you like to bet on? So this is last year. So as a joke, the guy came from like Southwest. He grew up in Dallas, and it seems like his girlfriend was from Kansas City. So as a joke, he said, okay, fine. So for basketball, I don't know, I'll put for $50 that the Dallas Mavericks are going to make it to the Western Conference Championship. They're going to go to the NBA Finals. And Kansas City Chiefs are, in honor of his girlfriend, they're going to win the Super Bowl that year. Guess what? That's exactly what happened. He got a phone call from the casino. Remember, this is months before. He got a phone call from the casino saying, hey, we have all your earnings. What do you want us to do with it? He's like, earnings? What are you talking about? They said, you came in a few months ago, $50. Oh, yeah. I won? Like, he totally didn't realize he won. He won. Big money. He like totally predicted it. I was like, the guy's like the Oracle or something. Like, he predicted it correctly. Everyone's like, wow, that's crazy. He just put in $50 and now the guy's a wealthy man. You have to know the same thing too. You put in a little bit, you never know where that's going to go. You make a little fire, a little flame, a little bit of warmth. You never know where that's going to go. You're a moon and you're against the sun. Like, you're making a big deal. Yes, you are. I'm the Robin to the Batman. No. You're the Cher to the Sunny. You're the Garfunkel to the Simon. I mean, like, how does that work exactly? You're the number 2 fiddle? Like, how does that work? The answer is, Hashem says, it doesn't work like that. You're making a profound difference. You're doing something very good. And the Machtashel, even giving a little shekel coin, what, it really makes a difference? The answer is, yeah, it does make a difference. Even that little bit. Something as small and insignificant like that, a half a shekel coin, doesn't make a difference if you're super wealthy or super poor. Everyone had to give. Regardless of who you are, where your social standing was, you had to give a half a shekel coin. And I believe that this is the idea of Bechlal, just the idea of tzedakah. Tzedakah is this idea that you want to give other people the ability and you're thinking of them, you're empathizing with them. Just the act of giving alone already made a dent in who you are. That already did something to you. It shows generosity of spirit. It shows that you're willing to think of others and you're giving to others and you want to help others. That already is putting you out of your own zone. You're not thinking about yourself, thinking about others. What a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'd like to share with you a few stories about this idea of tzedakah. First story took place with the Kapishitzer Rebbe, or Rabbi Yehoshua Heschel. Rabbi Yehoshua Heschel was known that when people would give him tzedakah and people would ask him, he would just give with an open hand. And the story goes is that one time there was a very wealthy man who did a very good business deal. And he was so excited to give the Kapishitzer Rebbe some money that he decided to do it with flair. And what he did was he went to the bank, asked them for as many hundreds that he could fit in certain suitcases. It was a tremendous amount of money. He came to the Kapishitzer Rebbe with the suitcases, opened them up, threw them on the table, and you talk about piles of money. It says, Rebbe, this is for you. He says, thank you, I appreciate that. Suddenly, they get a knock on the door, the Gabbai comes in. Rebbe, there's a couple here, their mom is crying, they're literally crying, they have to speak with you. Yes, come in. They said, we're making a chasana soon, we're making a wedding, we don't know how we're going to afford it. So the Rebbe took the whole pile of money in front of the gvir, in front of the guy, just pushed them. He says, here, take this. All of it? All of it. So the donor who just gave the money, he couldn't hold himself back. He goes, Rebbe, I mean, you give some of that, but all of that? I gave it for the Rebbe. He says, right, I'm giving it for them. He says, but Rebbe, how? Why? He says, how? Because I'm giving it to tzedakah. He says, but Rebbe, what about the Rebbe? He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu grants me that if I give a bracha, it'll happen. So Mitzvah Shem, you'll be matzliach, you'll give me more money. He says, how's the Rebbe so sure? How does the Rebbe know for sure? So the Rebbe says, very simple. We say, Zoreya tzedakos, that when you have a pile of tzedakah and you just seed it, meaning you just cast your seed out and you spread it all over the place, he says, I am Zoreya tzedakos. I take my tzedakah and I spread it out. And that's the same thing as well. A person should make sure to diversify their portfolio. Don't give specifically to only certain things that are your projects. Give things that are more than that. Diversify the portfolio. Just like any good stockbroker will tell you, you want to have a little here, a little there, a little there, a little more over there. But you diversify your portfolio. Diversify your tzedakah portfolio too. You should have in different areas as well. Says the Rebbe, Zoreya tzedakos. When you have that your tzedakah is spread all over the place, then matzmiach yeshuos. Then you'll have to start sprouting only good salvation. He says, when people come to me and they ask me for all these brachas and I give them a bracha, somehow it happens. I don't know how that happens, to tell you the truth. It just happens because Hashem wants it to happen, because it started from the tzedakah. There's a beautiful custom, actually. It's brought down in many of the achronim, that before you begin davening, you should try to give tzedakah, because you want Hashem to answer you. So the way you do that is by showing empathy to others. Giving tzedakah shows you're thinking of another person, and now you're ready to go. Hashem will be with you. This second story is going to blow your socks off. The story was told to me by the one who it happened to, Michael Milgram. Michael lives in South Florida, and he told me this story himself. The story goes that, unfortunately, his dad passed away when he was a young boy, and his mom raised him. And his mother told him, listen, I really think, Michael, that you should go away. You should not be in New York. It's not going to be good for you. He said, where am I going to go? He says, you should go to yeshiva. Go to Telz Yeshiva in Cleveland. Okay. So the family was very close to the commission to Rabbi Yehoshua, and they asked him what he thinks. He was sitting there quietly. Yeah, it's good for Michael. Let him go. So Michael, it was not a rich guy by any stretch of the imagination, and at that time he was poor, and he took his meager belongings with him and came to 28400 Euclid Avenue. Came to Telz Yeshiva. When he got there, he was like a fish in water. He was doing so well. Every single time, Michael told me, every single time he would come back to Brooklyn, he would speak with his Rebbe, the commission's Rebbe, and he asked, "Ni given this man, like, how was it? How did you learn?" He said, "I learned very well." He told him what he learned. Fine, okay. After 6 years, Michael decided it was time for him to move on. He wanted to go to college. Problem was that Telz Yeshiva didn't hold of going to college was the right thing for their type of bacher that they were molding. He says, "Okay, I need to move on." So he told the commissioner Rebbe that. The commissioner Rebbe kept quiet. He says, "Okay, if you feel that's right for you, you're an adult, you're a grown man, do whatever you need to do." Michael suddenly gets a tap on his shoulder one day, and he looks up, and he's a fellow friend of his, a bacher. He says, "Michael, the Hanholah Yeshiva, the faculty wants to speak to you." "The Hanholah wants to speak to me? What? I'm leaving soon. Like, why are they doing it?" He came in, and he sees all the yeshivas. He tells me all the yeshivas are there. Reb Gifter, Reb Baruch, Reb Chaim Stein, they're sitting there. "Bocharel, come here. Please sit down." Okay. It's quiet. Everyone's looking at each other. Somebody turns to Reb Gifter and says, "No, you're the Reish HaMedabrim. You're the one that could speak." So Reb Gifter says, "Young man, tell me, do you know what tuition is?" He says, "Of course I know what it is. It's the way that you're paying for the Rabbeim and everyone to stay afloat." "Do you think that your mother is paying tuition?" "I don't think so. Probably not." He says, "That's correct. She's not. It's very difficult for her. And the items that we have here are very expensive. And you have to realize it costs money for all these things." He says, "Okay, I understand." He says, "So where do you think we're getting the money from for tuition?" He's like, I don't know." He told me he started getting very nervous, like, "Oh my gosh, what are they going to do? They're going to ask me to start paying. I don't have the money. I'm a Yosem. I'm someone who was an orphan. I don't know." So Gifter looks up and says, "We have to tell this story to you because you need to know this." He said, "When you came to the yeshiva, we called up your mom, and your mother said, 'I can't afford it.' So he said, 'Okay, fine. You can't afford it. Fine. We'll still accept you. You look like a serious boy. We want to have you.' The problem is that he's not paying anything. So what are we going to do?" He said, "We got a phone call from the commission Rebbe." He called us up and said, "How's my Michael doing?" "Who's Michael?" "Michael Milgram." "Oh, yeah, sure, of course." Says the Rebbe, he says, "Please tell me your address. I'd like to share something with you." He's like, "What is that?" He's like, "I'd like to pay for the schar halimud. I'd like to pay for the tuition." He said, "Rebbe, what do you mean? That's not your obligation." He says, "Don't worry about it. I worked it out." He didn't work it out. He didn't even tell the mother. For 6 years, the Kapishnitzar Rebbe paid full tuition so Michael Milgram would be able to learn unobstructed, just to learn. Says Reb Gifter, up till now, when we heard this, the Kapishnitzar Rebbe told us, "I'm giving you the money, but it must be with the full condition you do not tell Michael I'm paying for it. Because the second he knows I'm paying for it, he'll feel so guilty and so inadequate, he'll just leave. I don't want him to leave. But if he's leaving anyways," the Shiva says, "if he's leaving anyways, ... now we feel we have an obligation to let you know." What a beautiful story. How somebody looks out for another person and will make sure that that person feels good. He didn't even know he was a tzedakah case. I'll never forget it. My father, he doesn't even know that I saw this. I remember I was walking with him into Unger's Bakery in Cleveland Heights. And when we walked in, I went to go grab an item from another aisle. My father thought I was in the other aisle. He didn't realize I came back. I knew exactly where it was. So I grabbed it and came right back. He thought I would get lost and I'd pull the wrong item and who knows what. So he thought that I did not see this. But Tati, I did see this. And what happened? He turned to the owner. He says, "Moshe," he says, "Moshe, do you have a notebook of people who have credit here? He said, oh yeah, of course they do. He says, he flips through it. He says, so my father took out a wad of cash, gave it to him and said, please do me a favor, just knock out whichever people need help. My father didn't even know who was on that notebook. And those people don't even know it was my father that gave tzedakah. It was literally like the Rambam says, the highest level that you could achieve for tzedakah is when you give, you have no clue who you're giving to, and the recipient has no clue who the giver is. Highest level. Because everyone's just scratching their head going, who could that have been? It's obviously from Hashem. And they attribute it directly to Hashem. It's such a kiddush Hashem when you do that. All these things, says Moshe Rabbeinu, I have a hard time understanding. Really, a small insignificant thing like that? Says the Kodesh Baruch Hu, yes. Even that small little item that you fight against the Tumah, the Klippa, all these horrible things, when you have the Chaydish, which represents the waxing and waning, but you understand that's how a Jew goes through life, through the waxing and waning. And a person has to understand, matzah shekel, everyone has to give a certain amount. You all have to give. And it's all the same amount, and we all have to give something, but it's the way we give it. How are we giving it? Are we giving it serotonin office? Are we giving it with a happy, smiling face, a countenance that would make us feel good and other people feel confident about that? That's really a question we have to ask ourselves. So ultimately, what we see from here says the Zohar description, an unbelievable idea. When it prefaced by saying Nechoshes, it's actually an acronym for Ner Chodesh Shkolim Tira. All those three things you should see. Tira, look how it's made. When a person understands how these things are made, that they're not insignificant. There's nothing insignificant. Oh, nothing insignificant. Hashem says, let me show you how to make it. I'll show you how it makes it. Literally, the Gemara that says, B'mokim, the place, She'ata Matzah Godol, where you find the greatest of Hashem, that's where you'll find his humility. And I saw an unbelievable idea from the Tanya. He says that Torah and mitzvahs, quote unquote, are simplistic. They're Hashem's way that he sort of dilutes what the real thing is going on up there in the upper spheres. So we don't get oh my gosh, this is really heavy. We don't get that because we just see physicality. We don't see what's really going on. And he says, ultimately, these elements of physicality are something that we could use to propel ourselves for greatness later on. But you have to realize that Torah and mitzvahs are Hashem's little commandments that he's giving us, a little Torah that he's giving us for us to connect to him in a very special way. But he doesn't need that. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, he lowered himself down to allow people to be able to connect to him. Where you find the greatest is through the humility. That is the point. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu had a hard time understanding. How could it be that from such a small, insignificant thing, that makes it amazing? And Hashem said, I'll show you. Let me show you how it's made. Oh, you show me how it's made? Okay, now we're talking. Now I understand. So it's the same thing here as well. You have to recognize, says the Zohar Shimshon, that Nechoshes, the acronym, represents these three things. That when you see those three things, you understand that it's Hashem in his humility saying that. And I just like to conclude with the following. I believe that's why, specifically, this remez is found in the word Nechoshes. Why? It's an amazing thing. First place, gold. Second place, silver. And third place is copper. So copper is basically, no. Third place. Not even second place. You're in third place. Okay. You feel bad about yourself. Says the Torah, no, Nechoshes. It's a little thing. You think it's a small thing? No. It means such a profound thing. That is where you're makdir all these unbelievable karbanos, the karbanos of Mizbeach, and all these wonderful things that they saw nisim happening in the first place of Mikdash is in the spot of the Mizbeach HaNechoshes. This copper one, the one of the lowest level metal, that's where you see greatness. And therefore, continuing on that same theme, because it's continuing on the theme of greatness, where you were least expected from those small copper pieces come great, unbelievable, amazing things. That's the idea that the Torah is telling us, says Zohar Shimshon. From a small little thing, you can nourish it and make it so much better and so much bigger. So that's my bracha to everyone in Mitzvah Hashem. This Shabbos should be a time we should all come together, look at one another, bring up one another, lift up one another, and see that if there's someone who needs our help, ultimately we could do that. We're in the position, because why else did Hashem want us to cross paths with such people? It's for us to help. And Mitzvah Hashem, we do that, God willing, we do that. It will indeed bring great illumination. It will also bring that throughout the waxing and the waning, we're still so connected to Hashem that nothing's going to swerve us from our path. And finally, a matzah shekel, even giving a little bit. It's not a little bit. It's the way that we're giving consistently. Ultimately, that's going to only yield great results. Zereat tzedakos, Matzmiach Yeshuas. Thank you for listening. Have a good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.